welcome everybody. So glad to be with you. You're in the right place at the right time, learning about fundraising. I want to honor this day, which is the Day of the Dead. And if you're celebrating, to say something great about it, it's not something that I celebrate, but I have to say, being able to go and talk with my relatives and my partner who passed away and bring them their favorite food and drink, I love this idea. I think it's great. Amber, anything else we should know about this day from that you do celebrate it?
That I hope you are present and center and that are ready to welcome the loved ones you have.
Excellent. Okay, so my loved ones will be very happy that we're talking about fundraising for social justice and how to get money from funders and work with funders. So I want to remind you that I'm still Margie Fine. I teach, train, and coach social justice groups how to raise money. I ran foundations for over 20 years, both the North Star Fund and the UU Beach program at Shelter Rock. Now I'm chair of the board of North Star and chair of the fundraising committee for the Center for Constitutional Rights. So not only am I trying to work with all of you, but I have to do this in my other life to do the things I say. Really, really glad to be with you. I want to introduce you to my co-leader today, Michael Romali. Michael, do you want to introduce yourself and maybe you could move the slides?
Hi, my name is Michael Hamill Romali, and I am an independent consultant now after having worked for 30 years on and off for a bunch of foundations, mostly on the grant making side, sometimes on the grant seeking side. And relevant to the conversation today, I was at Philanthropy New York, which is a regional association of grant makers for many years. And my current role as a consultant, I also am the editor for Inside Philanthropy, State of American Philanthropy series, which we'll touch on very briefly later on. And in terms of fundraising and being down in the trenches, I'm one of the co-founders and was the fundraising chair for Restaurant Workers Community Foundation, which started out as a really great idea that some really active restaurant workers had that grew from $0 to raising $8 million in 2020, and now has an annual budget of $2 million, not $22 million. That would be nice. Just $2 million a year, and is a national grant making organization. And I also serve on the board of Stonewall Community Foundation, which is also a grant raising organization.
Great, excellent. I'm really honored and happy to be doing this work with you, Michael. And it would be great. So it's been a little while since we all introduced ourselves to each other. So I wanted to give Avery a chance to introduce herself, who's our tech person. Avery, if you have any question, you can write to her, say something. Thank you for all you do, Avery. Mostly she's off screen, but I want to make sure you got to see her and all her great art behind her that she made, she painted. So really good. And to Ambar Pinto, who's one of the co-leads of this whole project. Ambar, you want to say anything else about you?
And I would love to hear in the chat if you liked our text messages yesterday. But that's it. Good to see you today.
We said in the text messages, make the money rain. So there you go. So God, they're always afraid you might have thought that I was writing from the Democratic Party telling you to vote, 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 because that's what a lot of them looked like. So, but I'm glad you liked it. That's good. Great. And I'm gonna call on you like from a Hollywood Square. So I'm gonna start with you, Kirsten, but do you prefer Kiki? Should we be calling you Kiki? Okay. I don't want you to feel like your mother's mad at you because I'm saying Kirsten. So, okay, you got it. So Kiki, you did think that. You want to introduce yourself, and your prompts are, let's flip the slide, Ambar. Name, pronouns, organization, role, and state where you are. So Kiki, you're first.
Sure. So my name is Kirsten, and I go primarily by Kiki. Actually, it was a nickname that only my friends called me until I started working in my organization. And my counterpart, who has the same role's name is Kirsten and spelled exactly the same way. So I've gotten really used to Kiki. And in fact, I think my family are the only ones who still call me Kirsten. It's just kind of become my name. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I work for CASA as a regional development manager for grants. I am located in Maryland, but I work primarily with our Virginia and Georgia teams, so sort of our southern region.
Great. Wow. CASA has really grown. Many states. Used to be CASA Maryland. Now it's this. Okay. Great. Welcome. So glad you're here. And we'll make sure we use Kiki. We should always make you were the coolest girl in school if you were Kiki. Okay. Nicole, welcome. And then Jennifer, you'll be next.
Hello, everyone. Nicole Rodriguez. I am the president of New Jersey Policy Perspective. We're a statewide research organization that focuses on policies that lift up economic, racial, and social justice.
Great. And you know my sister Janice fine. Oh, that's really good to know.
We
Yeah.
love her. I was just texting
Yay.
her.
You had to say that I would have thrown you out. No, okay. That's really good. Thank you. Okay, Jennifer, welcome.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Fekete-Donners. I'm also from New Jersey Policy Perspective. I am the development director there, and I feel you so hard, Kiki. I one time shared an office with another Jennifer and a Jody, and we were all
Wow.
pregnant at the same time.
Whoa.
It was a confusing sort of space to be in because it was not that big, and people would come in to say hello and just say, "Zzz," and we'd all. But it's a thing to have a common name.
Yeah, that's something. Okay, not a Jennifer, but a Shayla.
Hi, I am Shayla in Boston, Massachusetts, because I know we're not on the same time zone. I am a campaign organizer. What else did you ask me to say? My pronouns I heard, she, her, hers.
Right. What do you do there?
I'm a campaign assistant. That's a small title, but I do a lot. A lot of the background stuff. I handle some of the accounting, the membership, mailing, and I'm about to start getting into the fundraising and the grant stuff, hence my presence here.
Excellent. So glad you're here. That's great. Okay, and Lorraine, and then Allison, you're going to round it out. If I left anybody out.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lorraine Nyong'o, Health Justice Organizer at Healthcare for All. We're based in Massachusetts. Obviously, I live in Massachusetts, and my pronouns are the she series.
All right, excellent. Welcome. So glad you're here. And thank you, Lorraine, when you were talking for coming on camera. And for the rest of you, I want to respect that you might not be comfortable to be on camera, but if at all you can, it'd be great to see you. Also, that would be great.
Of course.
Okay, and Allison, and then I think there may be somebody else on too that I don't see. But Allison, will go to you first.
Okay. Hi, Allison Yeager. She, her pronouns. I am the executive director of Florida Health Justice Project, and based in Miami. And I'm sorry I can't be on camera right now, but I am in the car. But later I will.
Okay. All right. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, and we're having a conversation and chat about the Kirstens. Is this one of you? Are you on camera? Am I missing somebody? Or you're just chatting? There's another person.
I'm
Good.
listed as Kirsten Clark, but my name is actually Gage Ardog. And today is my second day with CASA, and I'm located in Maryland. My pronouns are she, her, and Aya, and my new title is Manager of Federal and Capital Grants. So here to learn as much as I can.
Oh, great. Welcome. Mazel tov, I would say. Congratulations. That's great to have that term. That's good. And we do have two Kirstens, and I almost missed you, but you're really Gage, right? Not Kirsten.
I'm really Gage, yes.
Okay, good. All right. All right, excellent. Did I miss anybody? Okay. All right, great. So I just wanted to review a little bit of session 1, which we talked about what's a foundation, what are the different types of foundations, what's some of the lingo that we use in this work, what are some of the intermediaries, philanthropy supporting organizations, serving organizations. Session 2, we talked about elements of a grant proposal, what motivates a program officer and how they think, and preparing for a meeting with the program officer. So that's good. Session agree, I will tell you in just a minute, or we're gonna do a poll. So Michael, take it away with the poll.
Okay, so we wanted to just get to know a little bit about your experience with fundraising from foundations. So I'm going to read off some descriptions that kind of get close, and so you can just pick whichever one comes closest to describing your amount of experience. None to a little is I haven't really done much foundation prospecting or seeking new foundation relationships from scratch. Moderate is I have had pretty good results in bringing new funders on based on organic relationships and pursuing relationships as they've happened. And we're good at tracking prospects from current funders in a system. Intermediate is I have experience creating target lists of high potential funders based on colleague recommendations, news coverage, and or formal prospect research. And I have at least a few opportunities reaching out to potential funders that we didn't have previous relationships with that led to serious funder conversations about receiving a grant. And advanced is I have been managing a strategic process for researching new potential foundation funders using a variety of methods and have an efficient system for tracking, rating, and prioritizing outreach to potential funders, which has produced steadily increasing foundation support and a more diverse array of funder types. So would you say that you have none to a little, moderate, intermediate, or advanced knowledge experience with fundraising from foundations? Well, I think that this is great that we are not like heavily weighted towards advanced people, and some people are intermediate. So this session is for everyone of any level, but I think that we will, as we've heard from this, will really kind of focus to make sure that our language is for the people with not a huge amount of experience. So whether you've got a lot of experience, this session will give you food for thought and hopefully some new ideas. We also just wanted to communicate that if, everybody has different experiences, this is going to focus on me and Margie's experiences with fundraising from foundations. But if you've had work with particular fundraising systems or particular experiences that don't jive with what you're hearing from us, definitely tell us, raise your hand, put it in the comments, because our experiences are just our experiences. And then lastly, there's this expression in foundation world that once you've met one foundation, you've met one foundation, meaning they're all very different, quirky creatures. And just because you have had experience with one foundation that treated you a certain way, or good or bad, that doesn't mean that the experience is going to be the same with the next foundation. They're all very quirky, weird organizations. So.
And feel free to use the thumbs up, I agree with you, or what is he talking about, for discussion, that's fine. And Marcia, I want to welcome you to the call. So glad that you're here. That's good, Marcia Jones. And I wanted to point out this great graphic that Michael has. Revolution is not a one-time event. As we know, fundraising is the same thing. Unless you get some wonderful sugar mama who gives you all the money you ever need for the rest of your life and for all your work, we have to keep fundraising it. I do think that fundraising is a revolutionary thing to do. There are people that I know who'd rather go to jail than have to ask somebody for money. I mean, they're so social justice oriented, but this makes them so scared. That you step up to bring in the money for social justice is a big deal. So thank you, Audre Lorde, for all you've ever done. May you rest in power, and thank you for this. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Prospecting formally and informally for finding new funders, building relationships with those funders, and keeping those fundraising relationships going forward, keeping it up. So, and I know that there's wisdom in this room and questions in this room or on this call, since we're not together. So I really urge you to write in the chat, raise your hand and say something here. I might call on you for some of your experience and things that you want to say, and really look forward to doing this work with you. So let's go to the next slide, and I'm turning it back over to Michael.
Okay, we're going to get into prospecting. So before we jump in, does anybody have any worries, concerns, or thoughts about anything that we've said so far? Okay, great. So prospecting is really just like the ways in which you like find out information about prospective grant makers. And we are going to divide this first part of the conversation into prospecting in very formal ways using tapping into funder tracking systems and informal ways. So that's tapping into news coverage, funders of similar organizations, and a variety of other ways that we're going to cover in a little bit. So could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the two formal prospecting systems that we're going to talk about a little bit are found, and this is just going to be like a very broad overview. So we can like talk some more if you have questions about how to use them in a little bit. But okay, so the main one that most people are familiar with is Foundation Directory Online, which is a product of Candid. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And another one that is probably new to a lot of folks is Inside Philanthropy's Grant Finder, which is also a funder research option. Can you go to the next page? Slide. So first, we're going to talk about Candid and the Foundation Directory. So as many of you may know, the Foundation Directory Online is a long-term product, a subscription service of the Foundation Center. And the Foundation Center merged with GuideStar a couple of years ago and created the company Candid. It is a nonprofit.
GuideStar, Michael. Say what GuideStar is.
What? Oh, GuideStar is the entity that accumulates all the 990s from nonprofits and foundations all across the country and puts them all in one place. It is under the, if you go to GuideStar, like guidestar.org, it is actually branded Candid now. So it's basically part of the whole Candid family of services related to nonprofits and foundations, foundation research. Okay. So the Foundation Directory is a subscription service. This is the screen you see when you first get in, and it is not cheap. It costs thousands of dollars per year. So it is a significant investment for organizations, but one that many grant-seeking organizations feel is essential to their work prospecting. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is not going to be like an in-depth tutorial, but I just wanted to show you that like when you're using this system, you can search on subject areas, you can search on geographic focus, you can search on population served. So that could be like people of color categories or youth or LGBTQ, all those kinds of things that you can search by. You can also search directly for a particular funder's name. You could look by your location and by whose category is by like, say you're looking for a particular program officer that you once had contact with, you can look that way, or a board member or something like that. So the subject area is really the one you will probably use the most, combined with the geographic focus. And I'll say in a minute when we move to the next slide, which you can do now, Amber, please. That basically when you do I put here up an example of like, you can look at multiple topics at the same time. So I looked at 5 different related topics related to health equity. And when I put just these categories in without like getting more granular using like a geographic focus or anything, it turned up 36,000 grant makers, potential grant makers. But I'm not gonna like, I didn't put in the screen where of the next screen that I clicked on that like showed what like were some of those 36,000 grant makers, potential grant makers, but they, just looking at the top 100, they included, everything from like foundations you've heard of, like Robert Wood Johnson Foundation or California Endowment and things like that you would expect, but also like kind of like things that are not applicable for us. So like, grant making government agencies, which, actually may be somewhat related to our work and you may be seeking, but I think probably not what you're thinking of when you're thinking of private foundations. So that's just to say that like when you put in these kinds of categories like healthcare access, health insurance, patients' rights, healthcare equality, and public health, a whole lot of grant makers come up. And the next step, which I think requires a lot more kind of conversation about how the ins and outs of these various systems, is to go one by one and see which organizations are best for you, or using various other search functions to whittle it down a little bit. But I just wanted to give you a little taste of Foundation Directory Online.
Shayla has a question.
Okay, thank you. Shayla?
2 questions. 1, why are there tax forms? And then question 2, I'm going to say them both because I'll forget. What is the benefit of having the recipients? Why would you want to see that? If you're looking for funding, why is that like relevant?
Right.
Curious.
So I haven't used either of those functions, but I can just tell you what comes to mind from my intuitively, and people who have different experiences can tell me if they've used them for other reasons. So the 990 forms, because this is all like the link to GuideStar basically, has all those tax forms. And so basically they have like found 70,000 tax returns that mention one of those 5 categories that I chose. So you would go directly to those nonprofit organizations, 990s, a list of them that like mentions somehow one of those terms. It could be in their mission statement that you have to put into your 990. It could be maybe in like if it's a grant making organizations, it could be like that they say that they're funding them, or they funded a single organization that has one of those terms. It could be a whole bunch of things. The recipients is closely related to grants. So grants are basically any grant that was made that uses one of those, that was tagged with one of those terms. And recipients, similarly, you could want to see like a whole list of organizations that are funded under those various terms. And we're going to talk later about like how do you use other similar organizations and check who their funders are as a strategy. So maybe you want to like, it's possible you might want to click on that list of 102,000 recipients to see if there are ones in your area that are, and then go to their website and see like who's funding them. So we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Michael, before we go on, I wondered whether you'd used this before, and if you had any comments from your work with United We Dream about this.
Yes, what I would share is that, when you see your recipients, when you're looking for a funder prospect, you're also go see on their website their funding priorities. And sometimes their funding priorities don't fall under the work that your organization is doing. This is where seeing the recipient list it's really helpful, because then you know who your peer organizations are. And if they're being funded by the same foundation, then the likelihood of them funding you as well, it's higher. And it also helps you on how you're going to package the work that you do for the certain funder based on who they're funding. So that's something I would add to that. Yeah.
Great. And Jennifer, I saw you nodding. Anything you would add to this, and having used this, or questions?
I haven't used this tool. I've used GuideStar for in the past, just because it's cheaper, and I have a friend who lets me use her login.
Good.
But yeah, I mean, just total plus one to what Ambar is saying, that sometimes your best prospect research comes from creeping on peer orgs. Because if they're
Yeah.
giving you one place that does that, it at
I
least means
agree.
you've got a shot.
Yeah.
Great, that's good. And Michael, could you just say quickly what a 990 is? I'm being mindful that there's some people here that are really new to this work.
Yeah, sure. So a 990 is the basically the tax return of the organization, of the nonprofit organization that the organization files with the IRS every year. And they are very helpful for two reasons. One, in the way that you can like find a lot of information about, general nonprofits, but all foundations also file a 990, and the foundations have to report every grant that they made. So you can see on a 990 how who they made grants to. It has very just kind of like name of organization and dollar amount. It doesn't have much beyond that, but you can get a lot of information out of that. And that is how those 990s are the source of much of the information that the Foundation Center and Foundation Directory Online uses to basically undergird all their data. There's only 900 foundations that directly report their data to the Foundation Center. And those foundations, are the bigger, more institutional foundations you've heard of, like Ford Foundation and Hewlett and all those kinds of big organizations. They don't just let the 990 take care of it. They do a lot more reporting with like every grant, like what it is and who's it's funding and all those kinds of things. But because there are so many thousands and thousands of grant makers in the Foundation Directory system, those kind of self-reporting 900 foundations are a relatively small part of the picture, but they are a large part of the dollar amount of foundation world.
Amber, you want to speak to what you wrote in the chat?
Yes, so you can also see amounts, right? And you and how much they funded. So you can do a little bit of like Jen was saying, the strategy, how much they're funding your peers, right? So for example, if you have a funder that is funding you, let's use this amount, like $5,000 a year, right? But you see that your peer organization, who's been a partner with you in most of your campaigns, is getting $25,000 a year. You're like, how is this happening, right? And so this is the opportunity where you have your meeting and you talk about the impact of your work. You talk about the fact that you've been in partnership with this organization, and you ask if there's an opportunity for them to increase your grant amount, and also multi-year commitment. I think one of the things that I was pushing for when I was a deputy development director at United We Dream is that trying to change all of our funders to multi-year, because that also decreases the amount of reporting and proposal writing we have to do every year, right? So that could also be a strategy if you're at the max of their given amount, that if they could do multi-year commitment.
That's great. Yeah.
Great, good. Did the person who asked the question, do we get to both parts of your question? And did this help you? Shayla, did this help? Or do you need more? Well,
No,
we'll
that's
come back.
thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, good. You're welcome. Okay. And I saw one more comment in the chat about this. I know funders who, they don't even look at your budget as much anymore. They look at the 990. They look it up there because one funder said that's where you find out what really is going on. Really happened to seeing that. So, but I haven't had everybody say that. So good. Okay, Michael, I think we answered those questions. Oh, Jennifer, you want to comment on what you just said here in the chat?
I like to check it also, or GuideStar at least, when or 990 when I'm first prospecting, right? Like, because sometimes they'll say, oh, our average grant, sometimes they'll share their average grant amount, sometimes they don't. But sometimes it also depends on what kind of work you're doing, what they're willing to do, and you can kind of make sure you're not coming in way off base in either direction. By really trolling that 990.
Great. Excellent. Any other questions or comments on this part? Then Michael, back to you. Okay.
Great. Could you go to the next slide, please? Great. So another system that could be helpful for folks and is a lot cheaper than the Foundation Directory Online and Candid suite of services is Inside Philanthropy's Grant Finder. So many fundraisers know Inside Philanthropy as a news source, but it is also it also has a large number of subscribers use the site for the Grant Finder service. And this is like just a kind of when you get to Grant Finder from the top main page of Inside Philanthropy, this is what you see. And so it goes directly, it's very intuitive. And you can search by foundation name, you can search by all kinds of keywords and by a state location. So next slide, please. And so I put in just like a public health search and turned up on this search for several hundred, 234 funders. And while they were that's a lot less than the thousands and thousands that came up in a Foundation Center search, these foundations are much more applicable to public health. I also didn't search on 5 different categories, so that's another reason for the lower numbers. But I just wanted to kind of say that when you search on Grant Finder, it's a much more tailored search, mostly of like institutional philanthropy and not like a whole bunch of extraneous organizations. And you also, I also wanted to show you when you do a search, these here are just like the first three that come up alphabetically. You can order them in different ways, but like it gives you a little brief description about what they are before you even click on the larger page that gives you like a much more in-depth description. But I just wanted to say it's like easy to kind of scroll through and just see if like if the funder seems like way off base or pretty close to like the kind of organization that might fund you. Okay, could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this, I also just wanted to show you that when people subscribe to Inside Philanthropy, aside from getting access to the news and the Grant Finder, they also have like a lot of like kind of like analysis of funding trends and funders, like top 10 lists and kind of like priorities that funders are funding right now, and all those kinds of things. So it's not just I feel like I'm doing sales for Inside Philanthropy. I'm really not. I'm just like, this is like another option. And there's like a lot of analysis. Yeah, so I'll just pause there. Because we're not going to do like an in-depth kind of like walkthrough of like how to do it. It's just like another system that's out there. And I think, I'm not sure what Inside Philanthropy charges for its suite of services, but I think it's in the $700 to $1,000 range. So it's a lot cheaper than Foundation Center. But don't
Michael, do you or Amber maybe know if say a couple of groups in here, say all the Massachusetts groups wanted to get a subscription together and share it, can they do that?
On Inside Philanthropy or on Foundation Center Online?
Both, all of it.
Oh, I think that I know that Inside Philanthropy has group memberships. I don't know how they define groups, like whether or not it can be multiple people across multiple organizations. I know that they have multiple user accounts that they've been actually pressing hard to do more of. That like is a big price break too.
Great. Amber, would you add anything to that? Okay, because some of you might be saying, well, why are they suggesting things that cost so much money? We can't afford that. But I wouldn't assume it till you could see whether other people might join in with you. to do this, or even to ask some of your funders, do you have access to this? Do you have access for all of your groups? And can we find a way to join in and to do this?
Yeah,
So,
100% agree. On that, I would also just, before moving on to kind of informal ways of doing prospect research outside of these kind of like research systems, there's one other research system that I want to note that's a little bit kind of a side note. Donor Search is one of the most prominent and online subscription services to identify individual major donors. But I wanted to mention that, which is not the topic of this discussion. We're really talking about foundations, but I just wanted to mention that because a lot of organizations do care about individual major donors, and those individual major donors often make their gifts through family foundations, family-owned businesses, or donor-advised funds. And I believe, I don't have a lot of experience with Donor Search, but I understand that they have a lot of those kind of family foundation information in their system. And I'd love to, if anyone has experience with Donor Search, I'd love to hear about it.
Jennifer, go.
Sorry, I have a big mouth.
No. Good.
I've worked with, I shopped Donor Search in an old job. Didn't end up going with that. I don't recall their ability in this area, though it's a great platform and they do search family foundations. I think if I recall correctly, iWave does offer some limited foundation grant making research. They've got like a tab within that system that does some of this work. It's not nearly as robust as the other tools. It's more like if you've got a thread already going. And it's better for like, oh, I'm going to look at this peer organization and see what they have. But again, that one's like $3,000 or $1,000 a year or something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you can find a way to access it, they're also both good for individual research though. So there might be a way to make the argument about doing it all at once.
Great. That's helpful. Keep that big mouth going. That's very helpful. That was good. Anybody else want to ask how to use this, or ask anybody on the call, or share something you've done? I'm glad that Shayla modeled asking questions. So this is the place to not think later on, oh, I wish I asked that.
So this is Allison. I have a question, but it's missing some critical information because at some point I thought I went to the Foundation Center's service. And I used to go to them in the 90s when they were actually like a physical place, like a library that you could go to. Do they have some sort of a free access? Because I did do a search. I definitely did not pay money for it. And I thought that it was their site where I was able to do some kind of search, and maybe it gave me limited results or, limited information per each result. But or maybe I just ended up getting shunted to some other site and didn't even really realize it. But I'm trying to figure out if that rings a bell and if you know what I'm talking about.
For me, yes, it does ring a bell. Like I find their system somewhat opaque. I think that there's not very far you can get without paying a fair amount of money, but I think that they do have some ability to have just a general GuideStar. Somebody said that it was less expensive. I thought GuideStar in accessing all the 990s is basically free, although there's some upgrades to GuideStar. I don't know what you get with the upgrades, but you can get access to all 990s through GuideStar for completely free. But the Foundation Directory online, I think that you can do some very I think you can do a funder search, an individual funder search. If you know the name of a particular foundation, you can search on that organization and find a fair amount of information about it. It's just I think using all these kind of search search mechanisms that cost money.
Because there was definitely a site, and now I have to go back and see if I can recreate what I did, where I was able to do a search that did sort of bring up health funders in Florida. But the reason I'm not remembering it is because so many of the results were just like the information was old, or it was a family foundation where there was no website and no way to actually find them. So I definitely got some list, but the results felt very close to useless. And so I was just trying to remember I was trying to figure out if you knew what that might be.
I'm not based on that particular set of clues.
Sorry. All right, well, if I can figure it back out, I'll send it to you. And I mean, but like I said, it was definitely it was not particularly useful. So I don't raise it as a tip, but just wondering if that was like some corner of the foundation center.
It might be. Like, they have so many different tentacles now, like so many different sub brands that it may well be part of Candid. So
yeah, okay, thank you.
Nicole asked, oh, did you see that, Michael? Go ahead.
I was gonna acknowledge that. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I was just gonna say, Nicole asked, bring on all the silly questions, you guys. Fine, that's good. These tools are expensive, she asked. Do any foundations help pay for these tools? Michael, what do you think?
I would say it would be a rarity for foundations specifically to pay for these tools. Like, I'm going to make a grant so you can use these tools. I think it would fall into something that if you were asking a foundation that you had a good relationship with and was into capacity building, this is something that you would want to say that you're going to pursue as a kind of like diversification of revenue sources strategy. And I think that they'd be open to that kind of funder would be open to funding that as part of a larger capacity building effort.
Yes, agreed. I agree with you, Michael. And I'm going to take your question back. When we report back out to Robert Wood Johnson about how this series has gone, I'm going to raise that to them, that this was a question that came up, because this is something that they could make available to the groups that are part of the Voices for Health Justice. So I think that's good. And I think for those funders who say things like, well, we really want to help people of color in leadership, this is a concrete way to do something like that. Not that other people couldn't use this as well, but I'm a big fundraiser. So if you don't ask, you don't get. So you could ask, worst they could do is say no, but they might think about it and do that. So I think that's a very good question, Nicole, not silly at all, and something worth looking at. All right, Michael, anything else you want to bring up about any of these things? Yeah, Allison, you're right. And then we'll move on.
No, I think we've covered like a very brief overview of the various systems that are out there. If anyone has experience with other systems, thank you for bringing the other one up, Jennifer. But if anybody else has experience with systems that they are aware of and want to share that with the group, that I'd love to hear.
Great.
Something that I would just add is that I know Michael briefly mentioned donor search for major donors. That is something that we're offering to the consultants. So if you're working with a consultant, your consultant may be able to run reports for you in donor search and get it back to you as part of this project. So we will send more details about that to you all.
Excellent. That's
Duly
great.
noted.
Perfect.
I did not know that. Okay.
Surprise, surprise. Okay.
Very nice.
All right.
My comment. Okay, great. So you want to go to the next slide, and Margie, you want to take this one?
Yes. Okay, I'm all for the informal ways of doing this work. And again, I want to hear anything that you all have to say about this. So here's 6 that I lifted up. And while Michael and I said, look, this is what we just think, I actually talk to funders all the time. In fact, sometime in the last session, I might talk to you about pet peeves that some of the funders said about groups and what they do that might be of interest to just see. But I think that informal prospecting is a really, really good way to get this, because if you do some of the other things on Candid, you're going to get thousands and thousands of names. some of the informal ways of doing this already screens out some of the groups for you. So I would read all the foundations supporting newsletters and newspaper information. What Michael just said, Inside Philanthropy, the Chronicle of Philanthropy, Philanthropy News Digest, all have search functions that also have lots of information. You can just read about what funders are doing. Inside Philanthropy is going to have one on public health coming up, Michael, right, in the next couple of months. So
Yep.
maybe worth seeing. Inside Philanthropy is not cheap. You have to pay for it, but it's worth it. I got it. In a way that got started, I took out a lifetime membership, and I've never been sorry because it's been really helpful to have it. So it's think about People Magazine in some ways, but on philanthropy. Those got good stuff in it. That's really good. And then some things, here's what's going on with this leadership and things you should know. I look a lot at funders who are funding similar organizations to me to find out who's funding them. It's not stealing a funder from them, because funders, as we talked about in our first session, fund in a program area and be looking at a number of groups. So they may be looking to, if they're funding nationally, to get some more groups in the South. They may be looking to round out the work they're doing, or any of those things. So look to see who's funding them. Would you apply to that funder by saying, oh, that Florida group you're funding, they suck, you should fund us? No, you're not going to do that. We're good people, but you're going to show and demonstrate what you bring to this and why it's good. You want to look at the members of philanthropy serving organizations, otherwise known as affinity groups, like the Environmental Grant Makers Association, Funders in Health. And often when they've had a conference, you can see a directory of people who attended. That's a great way to look at some of the names of groups that the funders that went to it. So you can see those names. And here's some of the ones that are my favorites, including Neighborhood Funders Group, which isn't health specific, but it's social justice oriented. So in those keywords that Michael was talking about before, I want you to think, in addition to what work you do, why you exist, where do you exist, what's your constituency, what's your strategy, and all of those things could also help you find funders who want to support your work. Area community foundations are really good. Michael, you want to say something about CF Leads members and how an outside group, not a funder, can access that?
Sure. So CF Leads is an affinity group of community foundations across the country, but specifically it's not just community foundations writ large. It's specifically community foundations who see their mandate as doing social justice change in communities. So not just, which should be, you'd think would be part of every community foundation's mandate or frame, but they are particular community foundation members who I think are particularly aligned with health equity, at least in theory. Yeah. And they have membership. I'm not sure if they have member lists on their website. I haven't returned to their website in a little while. But you can probably do some digging in terms of annual reports or whatever on their website and find references to various members of CF Leads.
Great, that sounds good. And I Google the names of funders, and a lot of stuff comes up. It's like such a simple thing to do, but a lot of things happen. So I would do that, and I would Google all kinds of things, like the name of the foundation, funders who fund health, and just see what happens that way, what you get from that. And then finally, I like to go to my current funders and ask them for names of people, and then have them make introductions and find the different ways that they might be able to help from that, to get in touch with people. And when a funder's about to tie me off, that is, we're not going to get a grant anymore, I do a lot of this, because they'll say, well, I'm going to give you one more grant and then goodbye. I try to find as many ways that I can use them till that connection is gone. So that's good. Any comments or questions about this list? Does this resonate? Good, I'm looking for that. Okay, Lorraine and Shayla, I can't see you. I just want to make sure this is all okay with you. Kiki, yes, thank you. Good, go ahead. Yeah. Good, all right. Do you all feel like you could start prospecting now? Some of these things, or you have a greater sense of doing it now than you did before? You could put a thumbs up in there or something to let us know. Okay, and you can always let us know. Thank you, Shayla. Oh, there's something else that you left out. Thank you, Nicole. Okay, we're gonna take a poll. Michael.
Yes. Okay. And so this poll really is going to help us gain information about like what level of future work we need to do with organizations around prospecting. So you'll be really helpful to tell us where you're at so that we know how much we should focus on prospecting in the future. So would you describe your knowledge of foundation fundraising tools, specifically these systems? Low, meaning I'm relatively new to organized fundraising from foundations and just learning what's out there to help. Moderate, meaning I have some experience searching in Foundation Directory Online or IP's Grant Finder or some other system, but we don't currently have a subscription to either. Intermediate would be I have access to one of these platforms and I've done some searching that has helped me get more information into our own funder tracking systems, but I feel like I'm not taking full advantage of what these platforms can do. Or advanced. Those online platforms, these online platforms are a daily element of my foundation fundraising efforts, and I feel like I'm taking advantage of most of their capabilities. All right, let's take the survey. All right, so I feel like based on the feedback that you're giving that we could probably spend some more time on prospecting systems in the future.
Yep, I would agree with you on that too. All right, good. All right, Michael.
Great. Okay, so now we are on to talking about building funder relationships. And this is really about the next step after you've been prospecting, you've got a target list, and you're thinking about like how to actually connect with people and make full use and start, growing relationships, connecting. So the first thing that you really want to make sure that you do is before you pick up the phone, before you talk to somebody at a meeting, before anything, have a good tracking system. So you should have some sort of formal system for tracking all contacts with existing and prospective funders, ideally built into a CRM, which is a customer relationship management system. Things like Neon, I'm trying to think what are all the other ones, Salesforce, whatever your CRM system is. And that system should not be the sole domain of the fundraising staff. It should be accessible and used by all staff members who are trained to enter new communications with funders and potential funders. Things like really quick notes like I had a nice conversation with XYZ about this program during a coffee session at a funders conference or whatever, as an example. So you really need to track those contacts, even the littlest conversations, so that everyone in the organization who's interacting with a funder or may interact with a funder can see the history. Another thing that you really want to do, and this kind of goes back to what Margie was saying in the previous round about informal prospecting, is get help from your current funders. They may be your very best advocates. So ask your existing funders for help thinking about and connecting to their funder contacts. You might even want to share with them, with really trusted funders, who your other target list funders are, who your top priorities are, and ask them who they know. How the funder community can be very insular, and you can actually use that to your advantage. Another thing you want to consider and really take advantage of is your board and high-level volunteers that are on committees and whatnot. So you could share that same target list that you've created with board members and well-connected volunteers and ask them, who do they know at these various organizations, and strategize around introductions. And then another idea, this is getting more creative, is thinking about yourself as not just going hat in hand asking, but prepare yourself to be offering something. And that offering is being an expert. Your organization knows a huge amount about health equity and how it's playing out in your area. That is knowledge that is worthwhile to a lot of funders. So if you are creating a report on findings about your work, or emailing targeted program officers and like telling them, sharing news with them, or inviting them to discuss what you're learning from your work over coffee, and presenting that as something that you're giving to them, that can start off the relationship as you offering something that they need, rather than having dollars be the starting point. Okay, so that's the first 4 things. There's more. Amber, you want to go to the next slide?
And you're like the go-to group. I would say that Amber worked with United We Dream, and it was the go-to group for DACA recipients for a lot of funders to go to. So that's a great thing, Michael. I want to yellow highlight what you just said.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, like when I was at Philanthropy New York, we had a person from United We Dream at our annual conference on immigrant and refugee issues. So, that was, I think, a great introduction for many of our member organizations to that organization, even though United We Dream is like internationally known. So, okay. More outreach strategies. So we're going to talk about some of these in session 4 in the next funder briefing. So if you're into these next 3 ideas, definitely stay tuned. But I want to touch on them now. So you can do a lot in building funder relationships by thinking about doing a self-organized funder briefing. So that would be like doing a panel discussion or some other kind of like event where you present what you're learning from your work. And you can invite funders, you can invite other nonprofits, you can even invite a key funder that you want to form a relationship to be a speaker on the panel. It's a great way of making them feel like they are a partner in your potential partner in your work. Site visits, which we're also going to talk about in the next session. A lot of you probably have experience with site visits, especially if you've worked for kind of like service provision, kind of grassroots organizations. You can bring a funder to where you do the work and interact with communities and show them what you're doing and introduce them to people who are important to the work and really give them kind of a personal connection to the work. And number 7, tapping into PSOs. So again, these are philanthropy serving organizations, sometimes referred to as affinity groups or regional associations of grant makers. And these organizations really exist to present knowledge to their foundation member organizations. And they have programming staff. So to the extent that you are able to form relationships with the programming staff of PSOs, and offer to make connections to other organizations and really help them as they're building their programming, that can be a really useful strategy for getting in front of funders. Another strategy is to get funders onto your mailing lists. So this is a little bit more of a challenge because I think more and more funders are like, I am just so overwhelmed with emails. I don't want to be on another email list. But to the extent that you can creatively and subtly say to them, we are regularly offering new information on health equity, and send them a personalized welcome note to those who say that they are interested in receiving additional information on health equity on a regular basis, and basically say to them, you're going to be on our organization's mailing list because you want more information on a regular basis about health equity. That can be a very good strategy. And it's really important to get as many funders onto your mailing list and just kind of passively receiving information about you on a regular basis. And the last item on this list is very related, but slightly different, which is sharing is caring. And I really believe that like organizations who are doing health equity work have such an incredible amount of potential power and resources that they can offer up in their own knowledge. So they can be an information broker on the issues that you care about. And if you've got contacts and you're developing relationships with funders and you have their email addresses, like the same kind of information that you would share a colleague in your office, like, oh, did you see this article, this really important article about what's going on? Send that to your funder that you're developing a relationship. Don't assume that they've seen the like most important piece of information that's happening on health equity in your community. A lot of things get lost in the shuffle. Send them blog posts from yourself or from colleague organizations that are doing related things that you think is important for them to share. Really, you can even like offer if something is happening that's important at the funder organization and you think that like the other people in your nonprofit network should see it, share that and tell the funder that you've shared that information with them. These are all ways that you position yourself as being kind of a central hub of information, and you will show that you are giving something as well as, you know, being an organization that's worthy of support. Okay.
I would say, Michael, it's also, you could also ask that funder that you share this with to share it with other funders, because they may be more likely to open it up when one of your funders shares it with them as well. Pretty much you're organizing money. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, you want to go to, well, I pause to see if that list of 9 things brings about any questions from folks.
And while people are thinking, I just want to welcome Supriya onto the call. It's going to be our guest funder from Hidden Leaf Foundation. We'll be talking to her in about 20 minutes. That's good. Yay.
And
Thank you.
I think we're running a little behind schedule. So Margie, you want to take the next slide?
Yes. Speed talker here. So here we go. So we have a lot of information on these slides, which you know that you're usually told just put one word on. But again, we thought that you would keep these slides and be looking at them later on. So we erred on more words than less. So you didn't go and say, well, why does it just say funder for number 1 and nothing else around it? So that's why you'll see this. So we wanted to talk about how to be prepared for approaching a funder, either casually, in person, or written outreach to do this. And this is all in Zoom days or sometimes in person now, but often not. You can't just talk to a program associate like we used to do when people were working in their offices. So this just gives you an idea of what to do. I don't need to read through all of these. I just might take some of them to just highlight them for what you might be able to say. This is also a way of building bridges. If I had to wrap this up in one way, it's to build a bridge with somebody. What do they care about? Why do they care about it? How can you make a connection to that? How can you find out in the time that you're talking to them? So you might reference something that you both care about, whether it's a better New York City or young people as consumers in healthcare, and how to get their voices more involved. What might those things be? And how you would talk about the issue that you want to tackle and what you're going to do about it, even if it's quick, finding ways to say this in a quicker way. And I would, if any of these things you might do, if it's in person, you might say 2 things and then ask a question. We don't want to have that person thinking, oh my God, how do I get away from Gage? She's just cornered me at this cocktail party and I can't move. We want them to feel more engaged with this. Haha, see how I got engaged in there? Okay, so you want to be able to think about all of those things. So these are things, and as Michael said earlier, just in getting your prep, what you're going to want to do with them. I'm going to give you a minute just to look at this. I also want you to think about your communication. Make it as easy as possible for people to engage with you in what you're doing. Think of stories you might tell that are emblematic of your work or people you're working with, and make it effort-free. Be careful of your jargon. Be careful of how you talk about things. You're looking both for factual information so people are more educated, but more than that, you're looking for an emotional response where that person says, oh man, this is exactly what I've been missing in my portfolio of grantees. Even if they don't say it exactly that way, they have that kind of connection. Okay, I know this is a lot of words on here, but because we've got like a one-room schoolhouse, I wanted to just touch on a lot of things. So if you're flying to a funder conference, you can prepare on the plane. It's not like, oh my God, I'm so busy. I can't believe they think we're going to do all this preparation before I get there. Do it on the plane. Read over the material, anything they sent you in advance if you can. Print some stuff out if you can't access your computer or your phone on the plane to look at stuff. If you don't know what the dress code is going to be like, I would go with dress and business casual. That will work every single time. Yes, the plane is a great place to practice, Kiki. You're totally right. So dress in business casual. You could bring a pair of jeans with you, but you can bring black pants and a comfortable sweater and be good. You could have a jacket and see if that's going to work. A scarf for women that would just dress something up or dress it down. So I would err on that. And because the people I'm going to see, I'm less worried about impressing all my buddies that we do work with all the time. And more, I want that funder to see me and say, I trust that person with a grant. I trust that person with the work. And somehow how you look can make a difference in that as a first impression. I like bringing business cards you can share with them, and I would get their business card and I'd flip it over and write a little note about the person you just met. Was there something they said at the conference or at the panel that you can follow up with later on? And I like to do something like 10 frequently asked questions about my organization that you can hand to somebody, because if you go to conferences, something's happened to you too, you don't want to be lugging around all this stuff with you as you're going through the conference. A one-pager will get people's interest and you can keep going with that. Even if you're not going to be in a formal way at the conference, there are informal things to do. So you could look to have a booth if they have a place where people are going to have things. You could share a booth if they're expensive. You could look into leading a site visit at the conference. So sometimes they'll say, well, we're going to be in Baltimore. I'm going to go to one soon. We're going to be in Baltimore, in the Baltimore area, and there are different funders, different groups like housing, healthcare, organizing, young people. You could be the one that organizes one of those things if they're doing that. Often there's free time at breakfast and people can self-organize, and you can help working with a funder of yours do a breakfast roundtable for this. You could be on a panel or a keynote, or I would still put on everybody's seat your one pager so they walk away with this one thing about you. Will some of them leave them on the seat? Yeah, some will, but more will take it than not. So you want to have it there. I would look at the list of who's going to be there if you get it in advance and identify who your funders could introduce you to and ask them. Ask them to do it. They can't just know what's in your head. Ask them to do that. And if there are some private evening events going on, ask some of your funders if you can go with them, or is this open, or what's there. A lot of good food at funder conferences in those places, and unless it says funders only, I really tell you, go to these. They're good. Okay, you could organize a get together or a dinner with your funder and with some other people who are going to be there. Don't just sit with your buddies at the conference, sit with people you don't know. Try to sit where a funder might be that you could know. And I always like to arrive early and stay late if time allows. And then, like with all other organizing, follow up, follow up, follow up. So for the newbies here, anybody else, for the people who are good at this, anything you would add? And for the people that are new, any questions you have on this?
I have a question and I might have missed it. Or you
Go ahead,
just
Shayla.
Number 5, what are booth opportunities?
Oh, so at a conference, often you can get a table. You might pay for a table. You can put all your materials out there. You may work with a constituency that makes things, and you can sell some of those things there that are easy. So it's things that people just can walk around and see for things that are there. Sometimes they're called booths. Sometimes it's a table. Michael, you want to add anything to this?
No, I mean, often they're like kind of like in the walkway from one area to another that forces the conference participants to walk past all these tables. So sometimes it's worth it just to like have a sign for your organization and some materials.
They often have coffee there and couches, and so it's where people are just hanging around. You can see if it's worth it to do that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, we've gone through a lot of things that are here. Yeah, good. We're going about the different questions that you might have about this. Go ahead, Kirsten. Can you speak to what you just put in the chat?
Sure. It was just a point about the business cards. We've started using an app with a digital business card that's like a QR code. I have found that, you know, because of pandemics situations, some people just don't have business cards on them as often as they used to. And so if somebody doesn't have a card on them and you have a digital business card, even if you have a physical one too, it creates an easy way to prompt to swap contact info so that you get theirs as well. And it
That
makes
is
it
totally cool. That's great. And Gage is nodding her head. So that's good. Gage, if you run into those as well?
they're really easy to use.
I've actually never heard of that, but that's a great idea to get the exchange. So if they don't have something, then you automatically have each other's contact
Yeah,
info.
I've actually also gotten some people's contact info that way that may have not been wanting to give me their card in the first place.
What card did you use?
Even our tech guru is highly recommending this. So maybe we can send some information to everybody about this. And Kiki, if you've got it, if you could share it, we'll share it with everybody.
Sure.
Thank
I
you.
have one,
What
I
a
have
great
one,
idea.
I'll share
Good.
both sides. I use actually, our development team uses one site and our Georgia team uses a different, but they're both really great.
I love that idea. I learned it here. That was good. That's great. Any other questions or comments? All right, let's go to the next slide. So this is a way to go deeper into, okay, I'm sold. I want to work with my funder on how they can help us more. And this is some information I got about how to think about your funders and how they might be able to help you, what kinds of people they are. And we're going to have two different slides on this. So this is not a formal thing. This is like from watching people and seeing what they're like. So you have an idea, maybe you want to help them with what they're going to do with this. There are people who are big on strategy. There are funders who are much more on literalist. They're literal about everything. Somebody has a single issue, they just want to talk more about healthcare. They'll help you share stuff like that. But if you were to pivot a little bit to talk about anti-racism in healthcare, they're confused. They don't quite get that. So we wanted to help you know who you're talking to and what's the best way that you can get that person to help you. You might have people who are know-it-all funders, and you may have funders who say, you don't know how busy I am. That does not mean they're not going to help you. That means somebody needs to be acknowledged. Yes, I bet you are really, really busy, and I so appreciate you taking this call. I so appreciate you making this time for this Zoom meeting. That's it. You don't have to change anything, just acknowledge what they're saying. And take notes, Priya, because I'm hoping you'll comment on this later on. Thank you. That's good. There are people who will pass through information to other funders. There are people who are confused, but if you organize them, I'm going to send you the paragraph. And if you could send it to these 5 funders, that would be great. That's a great way to help that funder do what you're asking them to do. Yeah. Hi. Okay. And I think people are still sharing information about how you can use a digital card. So that's good, Avery. Thanks. And then the progress of the 21st century, there may be, as we just got indicated, different ways that you can get to know your funder by doing a lot of these things, this digital card, these other ways of doing things. All right, next slide, please. All right, this is another way to think about funders. There are those that will advocate for you. They already think of that they got to be involved in this work because they want to help move money to the movement, however you define movement, and they're going to help you make this happen. There are bridge builders. They might even tell you, you know what, if you talk about community organizing, this funder won't want to talk to you. But if you talk about parental involvement and healthcare, they will. You want that. When somebody does something like that for you, a funder, that's a good thing because they're helping you know how you can connect with this other person. A connector is somebody who's like those other ones. They like making connections with people. And if they say, oh, you know, you should talk to Jerry Mannion, she'd really like you. You could say, really, would you make an introduction? Close the loop. Make that extra thing. Bless you, Nicole. You could have a critical friend. That critical friend may read your proposal and say, you have to be much more clear about your strategy. You talked about the problem a lot, but not the strategy. You say things like work around, but you don't say specifically what you're doing. I don't know what your theory is about how you're going to make a difference. Some people could be jerks doing that, but some people are helping you because it's going to be clear about what you could do in making this work. Some people are good facilitators in this work. They're going to help call a meeting together of other funders and have you be a speaker and bring people around together with that. Both ones that are likely to fund you and maybe some that are not likely to fund you. And some funders are excellent fundraisers. They know what it's like to get other funders to join this. They might be somebody that said, look, we're going to put $50,000 into this work and I'm looking for 5 other funders to join me. I turn to you first, Supriya, to see if you do it. Can we have a conversation? No promise, but they're not allergic to that. They're not like, oh, no, I don't want to bother people. I don't want to. No, they're willing to do that. There are people who are an idea mover. You're doing on something new or interesting, they're going to help you advance that and get that going forward. And there are funders who can be sounding boards. You could call them in between getting a grant and say, can we have 10 minutes? I just want to ask you this question, and honor that. If you say 10 minutes, get off in 10 minutes, unless they say, oh, no, you can stay on longer. We can talk more. And then you can see the rest of these. There are people who are translators, not literally Spanish to English, but they will translate what they think your idea is, go over it with you to different funders they think will care about this. So, and help because they know something more about them and how they might relate. I know in a lot of anti-racism work, we often say, don't do something for me without me. I agree with this. And I don't want that to happen here, but I want this to be where they're going to maybe do that first thing in. They know someone's going to listen to them first, so they make that overture and then they can bring you in to this work as well. You can have a validator. You may have written a book or written a report and they'll write a quote for you on it. They'll let other people know about those things. And then literally the last one is a voice amplifier. They will find the ways to take what you've done and amplify it out to a lot of other funders who might be willing to fund your work or should just know about this and see you and make that work. So let me just pause for a minute and see if you have any questions or comments on that and that work. And Ambra, I saw you nodding your head. Anything you want to add to this from your experience?
The only thing I would say is that do a regular check of your monthly donors or small donors on your databases for your program officers. I have found in the past that program officers become themselves monthly sustainers to your work. So that is just a reassurance to you to reach out to them and collaborate with them and see them as partners in getting funds for your organization.
Kiki, I saw you nodding your head. Anything you want to say to that?
No, just that we've seen that happen a couple of times too, and it's a like positive confirmation of how invested they are.
Excellent, great. Any other comments or questions?
I would just add that of all these like various roles that a program staff could play, nobody is any one thing at any one, all the time. So you might have somebody who is like an amazing, like critical friend who like really helps you think about things and like asks you why you're doing things. And then the next time you call them or email them, they're like, I'm too busy for anything right now. I'm on like I'm getting my board book together. Like if you have had any interactions with foundation staff, it's always like, I'm preparing for a board meeting. I'm trying to get the board book together. Like, don't take it personally. They're just in the weeds. And someday maybe they'll be your like validator or your voice amplifier the next week.
And you might be thinking, board book, what's a board book? The board book is when the funder, the grant program officer is putting the write-up about you in a form where they get sent to the board or the board's going to discuss later on to make decisions about the grants. They can be very arduous and they can be short, but I agree. If someone says board book, move on, find another time to get together. Look at that. Look what Supriya said. She's in board book prep now. All right, the fall is that time of year. All right, let's go to the next slide. So we talked a lot about grants management before. I just want you to make sure that you do all the things that are gonna make the grant go through smoothly. Do that. This is not a time to be late on getting your materials in. This is not a time to surprise somebody. This is not a time to screw up your funders and write the wrong grant for the wrong funder, which I'm telling you this because I've had people do that. So you want to just do all the things that we've talked about before, checking for mistakes, all those things. All right. So you can read this yourself. You don't need to read it, but it's the same type of thing about stewarding the funder relationship. So you met the funders, you got a grant, yay. I'm so happy for you. Now you want to make sure you do this stuff. Stay in touch throughout the year, throughout the cycle of your grant, of the grant you're getting. Make sure they are on your communication list, like we said before. You might do a one-on-one. I want to ask you some advice. Do you know so-and-so? Are you part of this coalition? Can we talk about, I'm doing something there? I want them to start to see you as a go-to person on the type of work that you do. Invite them to your events. Do you know that I've had people, funders who were not invited to someone's gala who said my feelings were hurt? To me, they didn't say to the group because they're being cool. Literally, there are people whose feelings could be hurt. Invite them. Invite them so they can go to this. Offer them thank you and credit in investing in what you've done. You can thank them in a publication you've done or in something else to give them credit. What difference did that grant make to you? So that's good. Communicate in language that's comfortable to them, not just to you. Like we talked about before, comfortable about movement direction. I partner with them in many ways, and we're going to talk more about that next week. In 2 weeks. Let them know about your victories. And you could do something that's like a paragraph. Good news. I wanted you to know about this. Be careful about the subject line so people can see that really easily. So they'll want to look at this fast. You don't have to write the whole long thing about this, but do that. Collect stories. I cannot say enough good things about stories. And when there's a big shift or something critical is coming up or something bad happened in your organization, let them know. Funders don't like to be surprised. Let them know in advance or let them know as soon as you can. Any question or comment on these? Let's flip to the last one here before we say hello to Supriya. Okay, so these, you might say, well, duh, but I want to make sure that nobody walks out not thinking, oh, they didn't talk about these different things. And these are really important. And these are things that I think funders should do for groups and groups should do for funders. Take initiative, keep transparency as much as you can, create safe space both ways. Consider nonverbal signals. I think that's a really important thing. Be open and be accountable. Say when things are off track. And even if they're doing something, you mentioned English as everybody should speak English. Could you say more about that? Not just say, uh-oh, you racist pig. Not that you'd say that out loud, but do that. I had a board member who said that once, and it's because he was Italian and his grandmother never learned English and he saw how she suffered. It actually was a nice guy, not a bad guy, the way he said this. Avoid assumptions and then make the leap to trust. Let's imagine and assume people are doing this for good reasons till they prove you otherwise. Hopefully they never will to do this. Okay. Any thoughts, any comments here, Michael? Anything you want to add?
No, I think you're covering all the right territory.
Okay, great. Any questions from anybody else here? All right, I feel like we're turning to dessert now, which is, yeah, the funder on our call, which we've had all this time. Supriya, welcome. This is a little background about her, but for a little while, I was lucky that she lived in New York, and I was so happy to see her and her family. It was so great, and then she moved. I don't know what you think California has that we don't have, but very engaged. You know, I often divide funders between those that are about stewarding the money and those that are about grantees and the work. Not that you have to choose. And I would put Supriya in the, I care about the groups. I got into this work because of social justice background, and I'm working on these things because I care and want groups to have the money they need in order to do the work they need to do. So I want to thank you so much for being on this with us. So please say something a little bit more about yourself that I didn't just say in this introduction or that's not written on here?
Sure. No, I'm so pleased to be here with you all. And just right off the bat, I just want to say, consider me a resource. I always try to make myself available and would like to help you all. I've been in your seat. I have been on both sides of this table of raising resources as well as doing the grant making work. And I think one thing I would just like to say, and this is just, a position that I have that I hope brings in some confidence to the process of this. And a couple of things. One is, this is public money, right? Like that we're talking about. So it's not that it's someone else's money. It's actually, your right to have access to it through program officers, through the foundations. And so, sometimes just demystifying that there is a gate and a wall and that it's not your resources to access, when in fact, it's just you trying to knock on that door and say, hey, can we share this pie a little bit more together? And then the other is that I just want to say, I really like that this is about relationship building, because I think that's at the heart of all of this, that we talk about moving money and we talk about kind of the transactional pieces. How do we get to just the human element, that we are people moving the same? We have common interests that we're trying to help move the world in a positive direction together. So I always try to get to the relational part of that, part of relationship building and fundraising. There's the transactional tactical piece, but how do we actually move as people together? How are we, there's a real power dynamic there, but how do we demystify that a little, that we're moving it together? So those are a couple of things, but I could say more, and I just really want to open up to see what questions or thoughts people have before I was taking some notes as Margie and Michael were talking that I might be able to kind of add on to, but I really want to see if you all have questions or thoughts or share some of your experiences that might have been confounding or, victories that you've had that could be useful.
So Sophia, the way we've been doing this is I'm going to ask you one or two questions while people are gathering their thoughts. Definitely glad to hear that you took some notes and that you're going to share that. And I'll turn it over to other people. But I wondered if you could say something about Hidden Leaf, what brought you there and what Hidden Leaf does.
Yeah, sure. I joined the Hidden Leaf Foundation 4 years ago, and I should tell you all that I actually play a dual role. So I'm an executive director and a board member at the Hidden Leaf Foundation, but I also do my own consulting on the side. So I'm only part-time at the Hidden Leaf Foundation. Feels like full-time on most days, as it does right now in grant making season. But in my consulting work, I work with foundations, largely that support community organizing, and also with community organizing groups around strategy. So again, I think that I'm kind of daily in the task of grant making and funder organizing. And what brought me to Hidden Leaf, and I'll say what brought me to philanthropy is actually, Margie, what you said early on. I was working in a large international health organization in Cambodia at the time. I was living in Cambodia. And I just thought, gosh, there's a lot of money on the table out there. And I don't know that there are a lot of people translating to what I believe to be the real solutions. And that maybe I should be playing a different role, that I have access to certain kinds of people. And, my family is from India, but I grew up in the United States. Maybe there was a reason for that, and I really thought about how I could play a role more powerfully in directing money, and money as a form of both power, but also relationship. And so I really believe in good work, and I really believe in moving good money to good work. And so that's what brought me to philanthropy. And with Hidden Leaf, I believe in what Hidden Leaf is about. I actually was not going to take an institutional funder job. I thought I want to continue to organize around philanthropy, but this foundation was very different, and it believed in sort of the inside out, that it wasn't just the transactional relationship of moving money, but the transformative relationship. So I wanted to see what it looked like for a funder to actually turn that lens back on itself. How do we transform society, and what's our role as a foundation, instead of going out there and directing others always around that? So that's some of the reason of why I came to the Hidden Leaf Foundation. I knew this family well, and I believed very strongly in its mission. And I don't know that I would take another institutional funder job, to be honest with you. I'm pretty happy here where I am for now. And if I were to leave this work, I really feel like I like the funder organizing. I want to get funders to understand what makes them tick and what their job is to move money.
What are the affinity groups you belong to, Priya?
Right now, I'm active in the Justice Funders Network here in the Bay Area, and I'm part of something called the Just Transition Investment Committee. So I'm looking at moving not just grants, but how funders are moving their investment dollars. And I'm happy to talk about that as well. Like, are there projects you all are working on that are investable, that are not just about your grant making? And that's something that's really important to me, to move those investment dollars. I'm also part of the Solidaire Network, which is kind of a lefty group, I would say, of foundations and individual donors in philanthropy looking for a quote unquote political home, if I can put it that way, from new folks with wealth to established institutional funders. I work very closely with Neighborhood Funders Group, and I've been a member of a number of other affinity groups, but I'll share those for now.
All right, great. I wanted to ask you one other thing, which is tell us about the notes you were taking or things you want to share, and then I'm going to open it to everybody else to ask questions. And Michael too.
I was laughing because I'm preparing for my board book, and that definitely came up, and it was I'm done. I've done my part, but then there's the facilitation of the meeting. You know, like you do your book, and then you've got to move the board, which is a whole other set of work that comes afterwards. And, you know, I just wanted to share that, you know, as I was listening to both of you present, remembering that funders need you as much as you need them to. And sometimes it doesn't feel that way because of the power dynamic, but they wouldn't be around, we wouldn't be around if not for the groups to fund. So I'm just thinking of the ways in which it kind of helps us to kind of walk through that door that is more, even though there is a definite power dynamic, I understand that. How do we walk in as equals and as people? And so that came to mind. And I wanted to give this example of an organization where I was at before. I used to run the Funders Collaborative on youth organizing. And one thing that was, so when I came into FCYO, I call it the dust was settling on the books. They were wondering if they were going to close down. I was the only staff person. Could we make the phoenix rise from the ashes? I believed, again, very much in the mission of the organization. I remember how hard it was to fundraise. I went and knocked on doors that it was a funders collaborative. There were funders sitting around the table that wanted to fund this, or so I thought. But I remember walking in, I had funders tell me this will be the last grant if we give it to this organization at all. And the phoenix did rise from the ashes. And I remember feeling like, okay, we got to 2 million at the end of 3 years. And we were doing regranting, and I was really burnt out and I needed to take a break from it. The new executive director, 10 years later, she was just over in my backyard, and she has brought it in a short amount of time to a $35 million organization, very short amount of time. And she has moved very large funders like Robert Wood Johnson to align with youth organizing. And part of what I felt I was doing in my own little way back then, and part of what she does in an enormous way that I'm just such a fan, I fangirl over her, is she's not afraid to ask. She's just not afraid to ask. And the other part of it that I wanted to say is, and this might speak to some of the bits that Margie, you had on the list of what kind of funder you are. Maybe it's my world and the world I operate in, but funders are often looking for learning opportunities where not just how can I learn about this one thing, but how can I be in a learning community? What learning community are you creating, you know, that I can be a part of? And so I think that that's what this organization FCYO now does, is really create learning communities that make funders kind of not just connect to the issue, but to each other as funders around the work, and as well to like a longer term learning that in foundations, we often, you know, don't have that ability to learn and have places where we can make mistakes. And I think sometimes that gets translated to all of you, like the stakes feel really high, but where can we actually learn and be vulnerable together? And I think that FCYO has really done a great job of that. I'm going to say something that sounds a little oxymoronic too. So I was thinking about know your audience. And, I have always approached fundraising as organizing strategy. So divvying funders into 3 tiers. These are the folks I know I can really move. These are the folks that I think it's going to take some time. I need to build relationship with. These folks are never going to move with me. And I always say no is never a no. If I put them in the never, it doesn't mean that I'm not thinking about them. It's just I'm calibrating my energy, and they're always kind of in that list. And I've seen people move from the 3s to the 1s, from the 2s to the 1s, and drop from the 1s to the 2s, right? And I say like calibrating your energy, because you might say, this funder has nothing to do with my area, nothing to do with what I'm thinking about. Health has become such a cross-cutting issue. When I bring up the example of FCYO, no one would have thought of youth organizing as a health equity or health issue 15 years ago when I was there. Knocking on the doors of health funders was not something that was typical. They have shifted, and to see, so when I say health is cross-cutting, a funder, even myself, a funder that doesn't even talk about health anywhere in our mission or mandate, increasingly we are funding things related to health and health equity. So just pointing that out, that where you might calibrate, you'd be surprised where there are places for overlap. I think, Margie, you talked about this, and I wanted to say feedback is often a really great way of building the relationship.
Yeah.
Sometimes Margie has introduced me to folks, and it's not a fit. It's not a fit for us. But they asked me, this last person that Margie introduced me to, what give me some feedback. And then it goes into a conversation, a thoughtful conversation about who else I could introduce that person to. And then you kind of get, if they're asking you those tough questions, if you've got, oh my God, I can tell you, I've cried real tears over those tough questions when people have asked me, well, what's your vision on day 1 of your job or something, right? I like to also turn it back to them to get into a dialogue. If you're asking me a question, how would you answer that question? Like, what are you looking for? So trying to get into a way of like really engaging where it's not just a one-way street, but we're in this dialogue. And I really believe in the longer term. My door is open to longer term relationship building. I like to think most of my colleagues are open to that as well. As you were saying, Michael, today it might be I'm too busy, but down the line. So just balancing between that persistence and also, calibrating when someone's really not really quite ready to have that conversation, but like moving past the transactional. I'm just trying to close the door on this grant to, you never know, let's cultivate this relationship, because I have worked with people I have not been able to move grants to, but in really powerful ways where someone else, I was not able to give a grant to a phenomenal organization here at Hidden Leaf, but I translated it because I sat on the Zoom Foundation advisory, and I was able to move them a $500,000 grant. Could never do that money here at Hidden Leaf, but because I had that relationship and that person really cultivated from a heart place, I was able to figure out where else I could move that money. So you never know, funder could be sitting in Foundation X, but they're actually really connected to many other entities and would be willing to move those. So and the last thing I'll say is a no is not a no. This is kind of a theme of what I'm saying. I also think about when people say no to you, say, what is it that you're going through? Maybe it's a transition. Maybe there's a particular project. Might you have other resources on the table? Are there discretionary grants? Sometimes people on the spot, they're like, oh yes, there's another person in the foundation that might be more apt to talk with you. So those were just a couple of tactical pieces that I thought about when we were, what are the dollars that are on the table with a funder that might not be their direct program. Yeah, I think those were some of the thoughts that I had, Margie, and I don't know from before when we talked if anything else might kick up that I haven't mentioned that would be worth.
Those are great comments. I mean, that's really helpful. I was seeing a lot of head nodding from people here. So let's open it up, all of you. And Michael, maybe you have a question too, but let's see from other people.
I have a question if others don't have. I think a lot of people on this Zoom call will feel fairly comfortable doing the things that we've talked about in the session with funders that they're really closely aligned with. But a lot of the funding you get on any given year is a set of funders that I think that you referred to as the number twos on your list, that like it was really not incredibly perfectly aligned, but you somehow were able to connect and made a case. You also often hear from funders who are like, I can't believe this person like wasted my time yapping my ear off about this thing that is not part of my program, area or whatever. But so how do fundraisers feel comfortable or read the tea leaves for that number two set of funders from your experience?
It's a great question, Michael. Thank you. And I bet you have some thoughts on this too. So I could ask you to jump in on this too. But I will say number twos are my favorite. Number ones, they're your number ones, and your number ones are your supporters already. You are cultivating them. You are getting to work with them more deeply. Sometimes you're riding with them. They're a 3 to 5 year funder. They're a 10-year funder. I don't know. Number twos are, the possibility is greater for the door to open with the number two. And you want to spend a little bit more time there. And I will say it's not fixed, right? Because there's a number two institution and then there's a number two person. So I might have never cracked the code on the Ford Foundation, but there's a new person at the Ford Foundation who came from my sector or came from, an organization that I knew. That makes it more likely to move. So tracking always the people in the organizations helps you to kind of move in that direction. And Michael, from your example of the yapping, you're saying like the funder saying, oh, this person yapped my head. Is that what you're saying? And like, it's not even really related.
Yeah.
I understand that frustration. I mean, it's not fun for you all also to be like feeling like you're talking into a void, right? So I often wonder and think about activating my number ones. How do I go to my number ones to figure out my number twos? I sometimes do that. I say, okay, hey, my solid core funder X, can we look at this list and like, can you tell me, what do you think about who I could be moving differently? Or do you know them? Do you know somebody that knows them? That's always an easier way in as opposed to the kind of cold call. And to also know, like, they might be a number two on your list, but you don't have a door in. So like, don't just force that door open, find the proper opening. Is there a webinar? Is there a conference? I think that's also part of the calibration. I don't know if that helps, but I really activate my ones a lot to figure out my twos and even my threes.
Great.
Who's not on my radar.
Really helpful. It's really good. Okay, so also you will come on to the screen. I can see your faces. I also want to check in with Allison. Glad you came on. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This is so helpful. Thank you so much. Oh, and now my dog decides she wants to be part of the call.
Yeah.
I am wondering whether, when you're talking to a new funder for the first time, is it always important to be coming to them pitching a specific project, or can it be a sort of, here's who we are, this is the range of things we do, I'd like to know what interests you, what resonates? Like, I don't know if that would come across as unprepared or whether that feels more honest.
I would say both and, right? Like, you want to read it, are they ready for that project? I was just supporting a group who did a funder webinar, and they were just going to talk about their work, and it's lovely work. It's really amazing, powerful, great work, but they didn't have a pitch. They didn't have an ask. And I just thought, you're in the room with 10 funders, or you never know who that funder is that you're talking to. they might have $10 million sitting right there that, you know, like, so I told her, I said, it was me and a couple of other people that were on the webinar with her before going on. I said, can you quickly just put together your 5 to 10 year picture of like a $5 to $10 million ask, calibrating to them? And it was, she felt really, you know, shocked. She felt really like shy even. And I said, this is, you always want that in your back pocket. You always want, if you're not, and I would say on a funder briefing, that's like direct. You need to come with the pitch at the end, what you're asking for. It's never out of line. So, you know, having it there and calibrating and knowing. And then, you know, I would say, if, you know, to Michael's point earlier, if it feels like you're doing all the talking, you know, maybe pause and kind of ask them, you know, do you have feedback? What do you think? And, you know, would you have time to hear about this project and give me some feedback about it? I'm looking for some additional support. Sometimes funders really love it too. I will tell you, the Solidaris space that I'm in, you've got a specific project and you're looking for matching resources. Funders love to fund where someone else is going first. So if you have somebody's already backing you and you're looking for a match, that's often a good place to have your pitch really ready. Those are some thoughts.
That's great. That's such good advice, information.
I
Allison, any follow-up to that, Allison, or that was okay? Good.
Yeah, no, that's hugely helpful. I mean, I think the only follow-up is sort of like the, when would you ever want to go in with just sort of a, I want you to know us, without a pitch? Or should you just always have the pitch in your back pocket and throw it out there when it seems like you may have gotten to that moment? And I guess the part B to that is, does the pitch have to be, here's a specific project that I think you might be interested in? Or can the pitch be, you know, like you said, this is our 5-year plan and we want you on board as one of our key supporters?
Michael wants to say something.
Well, I would just like basically reiterate and 100% agree with everything that Supriya said in terms of like reading the tea leaves, and like there's no right or wrong answer here. Like you have to like kind of know on the fly. But like for me, I personally try to avoid like project support whenever possible. And if a funder is open to general operating support, yes. But that doesn't mean that you're not saying linking general operating support to a specific set of things that a dollar amount will accomplish, right? Like if they're giving $100,000 or $1 million for general operating support, you should be able to articulate pretty clearly and off the top of your head what that will mean for your organization in terms of meeting the mission goals, right?
I would say this example I just gave you, Allison, that person, our foundation likes to do general operating support. That's our mandate. We believe in that. And you often want to push funders to fund you in that way. And I want to say that's when I said 2-Day Street too. So I want to just echo Michael here. And that organization came to me with a specific project. And I was just thinking, oh my gosh, this has got to be so exhausting for them to, you know, have to piece together this bit of money. And they're so incredible. They're a civil rights organization, unlike any other in this time. And why should she be, you know, it takes as much work. And I think, Michael, you might have said this earlier, it takes as much work to fundraise for the $10,000 to $15,000 project as it does for the whole organization. Go for the whole thing. Give them a menu. You know, Taj James, who I work with a lot, who used to run the Movement Strategy Center, he was you know, back in the day, we would call it, give them the Cadillac version and the VW Bug. And now we would say, give them the Tesla and give them the, I don't know, the smart car version.
So wait, I wanted to just, we're at 3:56 and Nicole has a really good question she put in here in the chat about funders in the social, racial justice, public policy world and moving towards funding national organizations versus groups doing state and local work. And if that's the case, what should groups like ours do to convince funders to fund us in our state and local area? So,
yeah, this is a
what
really
would you say?
I'm working on another project called the Community Power Building Fund. And it's interesting because it is a project that is supported by Robert Wood Johnson as well. And Robert Wood Johnson is funding 14 large nationals. And then they created a pool of funding to support the local and state efforts. So I think funders are recognizing this issue as well. And our strongest commitment as a group of funders sitting at a table funding this work is to talk about the translocal work, or how it not only aggregates up to local to national, but how important and necessary it is to have really strong local. I mean, I'm all about local. And one of the things for those of you working at the state and local level, I would encourage you to think about ways in which you amplify to the national level, always telling that story of, you know, this is what we're doing at the state and local, and this is how it ties to the national narrative. This is how it ties to networks and network building. That's a really big one. Another organization that I fund and work with is called Climate Justice Alliance. And one thing that they have done that is a really smart move is they have amassed as an alliance of many local organizations as a funder strategy. Like, that is one of the main reasons why they did it. If the big greens are getting all the dollars because they're so large, we need to amalgamate as a bunch of locals to look and appear and have the optics. And we know we have that punch and that pull at that level. So for those of you working at the state and local levels, how do you fundraise in network? And I know that's a whole lot of politics and a lot of things involved in that, but it's definitely something that I think about. And as an advocate in philanthropy, you know, I think myself and Margie and others are always talking about how the local needs more funding. So those are some thoughts that I have.
Amen. We're rounding out the end of the hour. I just wanted to see if we could put up the evaluation so people can start to fill it out now. And I wanted to remind you that we're not going to be meeting next week because of election vote, vote, vote. We are going to meet on November 15th. We are going to be talking about site visits and funder briefings. And speaking of Robert Wood Johnson, our program officer, Andrew, is going to be our Supriya for that one, for that day. So she'll be on there to talk about funder briefings and what she understands here. So I really, really push you, ask you, cajole you, please show up in 2 weeks and let other people know about this as well. You're getting a lot of nice comments in the chat saying thank you. Thank you to all of you for being here and for your great questions. Amber, thank you for sharing. Michael, thanks for being my partner here in doing this work, and also for the next time we're meeting together. And Priya, you were just the best. Thank you so much for coming today and sharing this way and sharing so honestly about philanthropy. If you guys could say in the chat, I want to ask you a final last question, which is, what's one piece of information you heard today that you are most likely to put into practice? So if you could put that in the chat, that'd be great. What's one piece of information you heard today that you're most likely to put into practice or stuck with you while you're filling out the evaluation? Thank you, everyone, for what you wrote, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Margie. Thanks, Michael. I'm going to
So good.
Really,
thank you so much.
I welcome
You're
any
great.
feedback too that you all have, and if there's any way that I can continue to support you in this work, please don't hesitate to call on me. It was fun.
Okay. Can I share your contact info?
Absolutely.
All right, great. Okay. All right. You were great. Thank you for everything. It was really, really good.
No problem. Enjoy, y'all. Take care.